You've gotten better at explaining why you can't move forward. That's the problem. 5 years ago, you didn't have the language for it. Now you do. You understand your patterns, your triggers, the exact psychological mechanics keeping you in place. You can describe the problem with clinical precision, and that precision, it became the most comfortable place you've ever lived. Insight doesn't break chains, it just makes them feel intellectual. You know what needs to happen. You've known for months, maybe years, but somewhere along the way, knowing and moving split into two separate things, and you barely notice the divorce. Being stuck stopped looking like chaos. It started looking like someone who consumes the right content, understands themselves deeply, and could map their entire psychological architecture on a whiteboard. Someone always one breakthrough away from finally starting. Someone whose problem isn't confusion, it's that understanding became a full-time job. You're working, you're aware, you're even improving in small ways. But that conversation you've been rehearsing, that decision you've been refining, that move you've been preparing for, it sits in the same exact place it did a year ago. Not because the timing isn't right, because preparation started feeling dangerously close to progress. The mind isn't blocked from lack of clarity. It's blocked because clarity learned to impersonate movement. Mental blocks don't announce themselves with panic or despair. They show up as routine, as function, as a life that looks surprisingly normal from the outside. You wake up, you work, you think, you plan. You're not paralyzed, you're not spiraling, you handle your responsibilities, maintain your relationships, even make progress in areas that don't particularly matter. Everything flows except the one thing that actually would change something. And that's what makes this so hard to name. It doesn't feel like being trapped. It feels like being careful, like waiting for the right conditions, like building a foundation that somehow never gets built on. Is it familiar to you? Most people expect a blocked mind to feel dramatic, like hitting a wall or drowning in confusion. But it's quieter than that. It's the engineer who understands systems theory but won't apply for the role. The writer who's outlined 17 drafts but never hits publish. The person who's been getting ready for so long that getting ready became the identity. This video won't fix that. It won't hand you a method or a mantra, but it will name something you've felt for years and couldn't quite articulate. And sometimes that's where movement actually starts. Not with motivation, but with recognition you can't unsee. Stay until the end. You'll know why. The assumption is that blocked minds belong to confused people, to those who don't know what they want or can't figure out their next step. But that's almost never how it works. The people most likely to stay stuck are the ones who see everything clearly. They've read the books. They understand cognitive biases, emotional regulation, the neuroscience of habit formation. They can explain why they react the way they do, predict their patterns with unsettling accuracy, and articulate their fears better than most therapists could. They're not lacking insight, they're drowning in it. Watch them closely, and you'll notice something strange. They consume content like it's oxygen, podcasts on productivity, videos on psychology, articles about decision-making. They know their attachment style, their Enneagram type, the exact childhood experience that shaped their risk tolerance. They can map their entire inner world with frightening precision. But ask them to make that message they've been avoiding for 3 months, and suddenly all that knowledge goes quiet. It's not about capability. These are often the same people who've solved complex problems at work, navigated difficult conversations with others, built skills in areas that didn't matter as much. The block isn't intellectual. It's operational. They know exactly what needs to happen. They've known for a while. But between knowing and doing sits something they keep stepping around. The person who spent 6 hours researching the best way to start a difficult conversation, but never actually starts it. The one who's rewritten their career plan 4 times this year with increasing sophistication, but hasn't applied anywhere. Who understands why they're afraid, can trace it back to specific moments, has the self-awareness to see the pattern, and still somehow doesn't move. Consciousness didn't free them. It just gave them better reasons to wait. The real trap isn't confusion. It's clarity used as camouflage. Think about the last time you reorganized your entire approach to something. New system, new framework, new perspective. You felt sharp doing it, intentional, like you were finally getting somewhere. And for a few weeks, maybe even months, that feeling of progress was real enough to live on. Then you notice the pattern. January, complete life overhaul, new priorities identified. April, different system, same problems. September, another reset, more sophisticated this time. December, you're back where you started, just with better vocabulary for why. The framework's changed. The feeling didn't. Someone spends a year studying communication styles before having one honest conversation. Another person reads everything about starting a business but never registers the domain. They're not procrastinating in the traditional sense. They're preparing endlessly, with genuine effort and legitimate learning. But preparation without a threshold becomes a hideout. What makes this dangerous is how intelligent it looks. You're not scrolling mindlessly or avoiding reality. You're engaged, thoughtful, actively working on yourself. The problem is that working on yourself became the thing you do instead of the thing that was supposed to prepare you for. You know what needs to shift. You've known for longer than you'd admit, but every time you get close to actually doing it, another layer of understanding reveals itself. Another book that might have the missing piece, another framework that could make it clearer. And clarity sounds so much like progress that you forget to check whether anything actually moves. The mind doesn't stay blocked because it lacks answers. It stays blocked because answers feel productive enough to qualify as movement. Understanding became the task, the real task, the one with uncertainty and exposure and no guarantee of control, sits untouched behind a wall of insight that gets taller every month. You're not stuck because you don't know enough. You're stuck because knowing became the destination. The mistake never shows up as a mistake, it shows up as wisdom. It sounds like, I'm just being strategic. I want to make sure I'm ready. I'm waiting for the right moment. And those aren't lies. They're not even excuses in the traditional sense. They're real considerations, legitimate concerns, the kind of thinking that separates reckless people from responsible ones. Except somewhere along the way, responsibility became indistinguishable from delay. Picture someone with a suitcase always packed, everything organized, routes researched, contingencies planned. They know exactly where they'd go if they decided to leave. They've thought through every detail, but they never actually book the flight. The preparation isn't fake, it's meticulous. It's just that the preparation became the point. Or the person drafting the same message for weeks, refining the tone, choosing better words, considering how it might land, not out of fear exactly, out of care, out of wanting to get it right. They'll send it when it's perfect, when the timing aligns, when they're certain it won't cause unnecessary damage. The draft file now has 47 versions, none of them sent. This is how the error disguises itself as maturity, as thoughtfulness, as the kind of careful consideration that supposedly separates adults from impulsive children. And in many contexts, that's exactly what it is. But when carefulness becomes permanent, when every decision needs one more week of reflection, when not yet turns into a way of life, something else is happening. The mind isn't protecting you from making the wrong move. It's protecting you from the vulnerability of making any move at all, because once you act, you lose the comfort of potential. You trade the safety of, I could if I wanted to, for the exposure of, I tried and here's what happened. You stop being the person who's preparing for something meaningful and become the person who did something that might not work. And that shift from possibility to reality is where the real resistance lives. Prisons don't always have bars. Sometimes they have routines, predictability, a level of discomfort you've learned to navigate so well it's stopped registering as discomfort. The brain doesn't optimize for happiness, it optimizes for survival, and survival at a neurological level means minimizing uncertainty. So when you're faced with two options, a known pain or an unknown outcome, your system will choose the known pain almost every time. Not because it's better, because it's mapped. That's why so many people aren't stuck in chaos. They're stuck in tolerability. The job that's fine, not great, not terrible, pays enough, doesn't inspire, doesn't destroy, just exists in that middle zone where it's hard to justify leaving because nothing is definitively wrong. The relationship that's warm enough to stay in, but cool enough that you've stopped expecting real intimacy. The city you've outgrown, but never quite hated enough to move from. Nothing dramatic happens in these situations. That's the problem. If something exploded, you'd have a clear reason to move, but nothing explodes. It just stays the same, year after year, slightly numb, slightly restless, but functional, and functional is a dangerous place to live for a long time. You're not trapped by external forces. No one's holding you there. You could leave the job, end the relationship, book the flight tomorrow if you wanted to. The door isn't locked, but you've been standing in the same room for so long that leaving started to feel more unrealistic than staying. The repetition created a bond, not an emotional bond, a structural one. Your identity got woven into the pattern. The version of you that tolerates this situation became who you are. And changing the situation would mean becoming someone you don't know yet, someone unproven, someone who might fail in ways you haven't already learned to manage. So you stay, not because you decided to, because deciding to leave would require becoming a different person first. And that feels impossible from inside the familiar room. No one locked the door. That's the strangest part. You built the walls yourself, one small decision at a time, until they became invisible. This is the psychological handcuff, not imposed by trauma, circumstance, or anyone else, created by the simple, quiet repetition of choosing not to move. Each time you avoid the conversation, delay the decision, or stay in the situation one more month, something hardens, not dramatically, just slightly. Like calcification, you don't notice until years later when you realize you can't bend the way you used to. The relationship that stopped evolving but never got bad enough to end. The job that's comfortable enough to keep but unfulfilling enough to drain you slowly. The version of yourself you present to the world that's acceptable, safe, and increasingly distant from who you actually are. These aren't prisons in the traditional sense. They're agreements you made with yourself that became defaults, and defaults, when left unexamined, turn into identity. What makes this so difficult to address is that nothing hurts sharply. It's not abuse, it's not crisis, it's the slow erosion of aliveness. You're still functioning, still managing, still showing up, but somewhere in the background, a part of you is screaming at a frequency you've learned to tune out. The person who stays in the relationship because leaving would hurt someone they care about, except they're also slowly disappearing inside it. The one who remains in the career because it's stable and makes sense on paper, even though they haven't felt genuinely excited about their work in years. Who maintains the friendships that feel obligatory, the routines that feel empty, the life that looks fine from every angle, except the one where you're honest. And honesty is the thing you've been avoiding longest, because admitting you're choosing this, that you've been choosing this, means you could have chosen differently, that the years weren't stolen, they were spent, and that recognition is harder to sit with than blaming circumstances ever was. Time doesn't punish you, it just watches, and that might be worse. Nothing catastrophic happened. That's what you tell yourself when you look back. No disasters, no explosions. No moment where everything fell apart, just years that passed while you figured things out, while you waited for clarity, while you built the foundation that never quite felt ready to build on. And then one day you notice the people who started when you were still preparing. They're not smarter, they didn't have better circumstances. Some of them stumbled badly along the way, but they moved. And movement, even imperfect movement, compounds in ways that preparation doesn't. The friend who launched the thing they barely understood while you were still researching. The colleague who had the conversation you've been scripting for months. The person who moved to the city, started the project, ended the relationship you're still working on. Not because they had more courage, but because they didn't wait for certainty before acting. You weren't doing nothing. You were optimizing, planning, understanding yourself better, real work, legitimate progress in certain areas. But the thing that mattered, the decision that would have actually changed the trajectory, stayed theoretical. Opportunities didn't disappear dramatically. They just aged out quietly. The job posting closed. The person moved on. The window for the conversation narrowed and then shut without announcement. Not because you missed them, because you delayed them until they stopped being relevant. And time kept moving, not cruelly, just consistently. This is the cost nobody mentions. Not failure, not rejection, not the pain of trying and falling short, but the hollowing that comes from realizing you've been standing still while calling it strategy. That the years weren't stolen by circumstance. They dissolved in the gap between knowing what to do and doing it. The minutes didn't betray you. They just accumulated into years while you waited for a version of ready that never arrives. And now you're here, more prepared than ever, looking at a life that somehow got smaller while you were getting smarter. The mistake finally has a name, and it's simpler than you'd think. You've been waiting to feel different before you act, waiting for confidence to arrive before you move, for fear to dissolve before you speak, for clarity to feel complete before you decide. As if the right emotional state is a prerequisite for action rather than something that emerges through it. But feelings don't lead, they follow. The person who feels ready didn't wait until readiness showed up. They moved while uncertain and discovered capability in motion. The one who feels confident now wasn't confident before the first attempt. They built confidence through repeated exposure to discomfort. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act while fear is still present. You've been operating under a subtle but devastating belief that internal shifts must precede external ones, that you need to fix yourself first, align your emotions, resolve your past, and reach some baseline of okayness before you're allowed to take the step that actually matters. So you work on yourself endlessly. Therapy, reflection, journaling, frameworks, all useful, all legitimate. But somewhere in that process, self-improvement became self-delay. You convinced yourself that once you're healed enough, clear enough, brave enough, then you'll act. Except that moment never comes. Because healing isn't a destination you arrive at before living. It's something that happens through engagement with the life you've been postponing. Consciousness without action is just sophisticated avoidance. And when it continues long enough, it stops being strategy and becomes betrayal. Not of some grand potential, of the small, specific version of you that keeps showing up, keeps hoping, keeps believing that this time you'll actually follow through. That version doesn't need another insight. It needs you to stop negotiating with reality and move, even badly, even scared, even without knowing how it ends. Because the cost of not moving isn't failure, it's the slow erosion of trust in yourself. And that's a cost you've been paying for longer than you've admitted. This isn't a defect you need to fix immediately. It's a signal most people never receive. Most people don't get here. They don't reach the point where they can see the pattern clearly, name the mechanism, understand what's keeping them in place. They stay in the cycle without knowing it's a cycle. They repeat the same year for a decade and call it a life without ever noticing the repetition. But you noticed. And that noticing, uncomfortable as it is rare. It means you've developed enough awareness to see the gap between what you know and what you do. Enough honesty to admit you've been using sophistication as a hiding place. Enough clarity to recognize that understanding became a replacement for movement. That's not common. That's not weakness. That's the prerequisite for change most people never develop. The problem isn't that you're broken. It's that you're conscious in a way that makes staying comfortable impossible and moving forward terrifying. You're caught between two versions of yourself. the one who can't pretend anymore, and the one who hasn't stepped into what's next. And that position, that specific tension, is where every real shift begins. Not with certainty, not with fearlessness, not with a sudden surge of motivation that makes everything feel easy, but with the quiet recognition that you've been lying to yourself in increasingly elegant ways, and that lie just stopped working. This is where you separate from people who stay stuck forever. Not because you'll suddenly transform into someone bold and decisive, but because you're starting to see that waiting for permission from yourself, from circumstances, from the feeling of readiness, is the thing keeping you locked in place. Change doesn't require an epic moment. It requires one small, imperfect action taken while every part of you is still screaming to wait. Just one. Not perfect, not guaranteed, just done. And that action, however minor, breaks the spell. Not because it solves everything, because it proves that movement is possible even when clarity isn't complete. The mistake was never not knowing what to do. It was waiting for permission that never comes. You've been looking for a sign, a feeling, a moment of absolute certainty that tells you it's finally time. But that moment doesn't exist. It never did. The version of you that feels completely ready is a fantasy you've been negotiating with while your life stays paused. No one's coming to tell you it's safe to move now. No external force will validate your decision. No amount of preparation will eliminate the discomfort of acting before you feel ready. The door was never locked. You've just been standing in front of it, perfecting your reason for not walking through. If this video gave you the clarity you've been searching for, subscribe. This channel exists to help you see what's been invisible, not to judge you, but to give you the language for what you've been feeling. Every video here is built to add real value to your life, to help you move forward in ways that actually matter. And if someone you know has been stuck in the same place for too long, share this with them. Sometimes the most helpful thing is showing someone they're not alone in what they're experiencing.